Welcome to all Red Eyes Creations members. Thank you for being here and thank you for tuning in. We are talking with Keith Chester and we are talking about the book Strange Company, Military Encounters with UFOs in World War II. And I'd like to continue here this second segment to talk a little bit more about the potential idea of what the Foo Fighters that we have been discussing, what they are, if that is the case, or where they come from, if that is the case. And also, of course, we have the idea of talking a little bit more about the advanced technology from either, if we're speaking about Germany or the US, if this actually might be some kind of covert operation with new technology being developed and so forth. So there are plenty more avenues to explore here with Keith. But hey, listen, let's continue talking a little bit about this idea of where what these might be, the Foo Fighters. When you were discussing with other people, those who have seen this themselves, eyewitness reports, and even maybe going through some of the documentation, were there hints anywhere to ideas or theories about what they actually are or where they actually come from?
As far as official documentation, no. And I guess you can imagine why. Most of the documentation is always watered down for whatever reason, espionage reasons. And of course, I believe during the war, there was a real emphasis on we are dealing with German technology, advanced technology. It was well understood that aeronautically wise, the Germans were probably 20 years ahead of us, the United States and Britain, in some areas of research. So the fact that they were the first on the scene with the V-1s, the V-2s, and then the jets, and of course there are a ton of projects were on the drawing board tables and some prototypes. There was no doubt that that's how they had to look at it. Regarding the actual veterans who observed the aircraft, I encountered two people personally during the research of my book who felt that they were not German technology. It was far in advance of any known technology that they felt was in existence in the world. And, of course, the term extraterrestrial would pop up.
Sure.
Leonard Stringfield, of course, many of your listeners know who he was associated with the 5th Air Force, and his sighting was so remarkable, he devoted his life to the subject. And he was convinced that whatever it was beyond the confines of this earth. And then, of course, what, why, and how was what he pursued the rest of his life. The unit that named the observation is the Foo Fighters. The commanding officer of the 415th Night Fighter Squadron, his name is Major Harold Augsburger, and he's still alive today, living in Ohio. And he actually observed them. Most all the men in his unit did. And at one point, so many observations were being reported, men from Washington showed up at his airbase, at his airfield, Rance, and approached his intelligence officer, Fred Ringwald, and wanted to go up and find out what all the hubbub was and find out exactly what was being observed, because they could not account for these strange sightings. They weren't matching, I guess, the fact that, one, they weren't appearing on radar. If they were objects, they were circular in design, which was definitely unconventional. They exhibited no type of thrust like a jet. They had, the designs were completely unusual in terms of, most instances it was just a ball of light. And yet they still felt that it was something solid in structure. And so these men from Washington came and conducted an investigation and left. And of course, he never knew anything else about their visit. He was told that it was to be kept under wraps. So he was of the mindset that, yeah, we were dealing with German technology. And then, of course, he had a sighting later on, after all his men reported it, and his observation was of an an object that was circular, white in color, approached this aircraft out of nowhere. He could not determine if it was shot from the ground, if it came from above, but there it was. And after a period of time, it shot up into the stars, the night sky, at, he thought, thousands of miles per hour, and disappeared among the stars. And he was convinced that it was not a rocket. So today, he feels that there's a good chance that what they experienced during the war, a lot of the sightings were the classic UFOs of today. And he feels that there's a good chance that we're dealing with something from another world. But, of course, there's no documentation in my book that ever came close to that. Pretty much it was ridicule. They called it Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon sightings, but they did use the term phenomenon, still showing there was confusion.
Absolutely.
Which does a lot for military documentation.
Exactly. It does, that's right. You know, one thing that kind of, boggles my mind is why these things are appearing around this particular time when World War II is ongoing in that sense. One idea, I guess, is that because there actually are a lot of airplanes around, a lot of pilots, human beings are in airplanes flying around all over the world, basically, that kind of opens up this scenario a bit more, and one tends to speculate that, okay, maybe these things actually are around all the time, but because of the numbers, so to speak, of how many people are up there, more sightings consequently occurs because of that. And any theories or ideas about that?
Well, yes. I mean, the air traffic was unprecedented at that time. I mean, there was so much aircraft in the air, no other time in history had seen it. So it stands to reason that there would be more observations. And with that, there had to be gun camera footage. There were lots of cameras up there in the air. If you watch any World War II documentary of the air war, I mean, even in the thick of combat, they were filming.
Sure.
And there were whole units designed as aerial reconnaissance, and that's all they did, take pictures. So from what I gather, there was plenty of film and plenty of photographs, but they were whisked away to the depths of the military commands wherever and still don't exist. I mean, there are a few Foo Fighter, again, we're using that term as an overall term, exist, but they are still surrounded with controversy. There's no real hands-down official documented Foo Fighter picture that I know of that exists. But and that's a shame. But it tells me that there was indeed some type of operation effect to keep this under wraps. If it was German technology, they had to keep it under wraps no matter what. Yeah. And of course, we know that the controversy that surrounds the subject of the World War II sightings, because many believe that it was a Nazi flying saucer program. Exactly. Yeah. Huh. Have you? What are kind of your ideas about a theory as such? Do you think it's possible, or I mean, it could be possible also that the Nazis actually got this technology from somewhere, crashed UFO or something like that? But what are your ideas about it? Well, you're absolutely right. It depends on what eyes you look at it through. If I looked at it through the eyes of an intelligence officer during the war, I would have thought German, absolutely. But then if I was that same intelligence officer and I saw a report come in across my desk, and one that was fairly remarkable, let's see here, just off the top of my head, they were seen in 1943 over the Ruhr Valley. Sergeant Gordon Cockcroft, RAF pilot, and Captain Ray Smith were in a Halifax bomber, and they saw a cylindrical object, silvery gold in color, had several portholes evenly spaced along its side that hung motionless in the air. And then it sped away at estimated thousands of miles per hour. That was definitely something that would have startled me. And those official reports don't exist. However, there is one report that came out that still is in the archives, and researchers in England, Dr. David Clark and Andy Roberts, I believe, uncovered this. In November 28th of 42 over Turin, Italy, the number 5 group observed an object that was 200 to 300 feet in length and was traveling at 500 miles per hour.
Mm-hmm.
It had 4 red lights spaced at equal distances along the body. Now, what's amazing is in that report, the number 5 group wrote to Bomber Command on December 3rd, and I quote, "Herewith a copy of a report received from a crew of a Lancaster after raid on Turin. The crew refuses to be shaken on their story in the face of the usual banter." So there were remarkable stories coming in. Now, some of the most remarkable sightings, of course, to me show that I just cannot understand how it could have been German technology at that time.
Yeah.
I believe that there was parabolic designs, UFO designs on the drafting tables. I believe that they may have built prototypes. I mean, all that is possible.
Sure.
And I'm willing to accept that. But to say that all the way back to 1933 or the beginning of the war, there were aircraft built by the Germans that were operating with extraordinary control, with extraordinary capabilities, and in numbers.
Very interesting.
So to me, then, why were they relying on the ME-262?
Well, exactly. Then we have to go into the more conspiratorial worldview, where we examine the fact that world wars to begin with actually are created by secret society and so forth. But let's not go there for this interview, because but again, that's a possibility, and if that is the case, then there might be keeping in store, so to speak, the real technology, so to speak. But
yes.
Anyway, are there any kind of reports indicating that Foo Fighters or UFOs, in regards to what happened during World War II, that they actually were hostile or engaging in any way the conventional airplanes?
Nothing that I'm aware of that you could term hostile. The fact that an aircraft or an object was approaching a military combat aircraft could be termed hostile, whether it was firing on them or not.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that something was pacing an aircraft in the heat of combat or over enemy territory, you could call that hostile. But I'm not aware of too much where the actual objects were attacking the Allied aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Allied aircraft were definitely attacking them. They were given orders to shoot them down. They tried their best to outmaneuver them with no luck. I mean, for instance, some of the 415th Night Fighter Squadron pilots would look out, see this glowing object off their wingtip. They weren't sure it was at night, but they were fairly certain it was within several hundred yards. Decide to go after it. They do a rollover and go after the object. The object would disappear, and the next thing they know, it's behind them. So they were reporting this. And that's some of those reports were the reason that men from Washington were coming in. So, again, the reports showed, this is rocket phenomena, or this is flare phenomena, that the men don't realize that's what they're seeing because it's at a distance. Optical illusions. The Navy, U.S. Navy had written reports that reflected that the actual sightings by experienced pilots, because of optical illusions, a variety of reasons, were misidentifications. And so everything's in the barrel, and you have to look at everything. Just like today, the confusion exists.
Yeah.
No matter how much information you have, people will look at it and say, well, what about this, this, and this? And
exactly.
Nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's totally right, and that's also what we're kind of doing here, trying to explore and just see what the heck this can be. And one idea or